Hello and welcome to 18 WJTS Inform. As usual, it's Friday and we are visited by State Senator Mark Messmer. Senator, welcome to the show. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
Great to be here. We are approaching the end of the first half of session. Monday and Tuesday we'll wrap up, and it's been a fast-paced, hectic week, but a good week for me.
Well, and to remind people, we are in a short session.
Mm-hmm, right.
I always get confused between the short and the long session. Okay, well, we're going to talk about the good things that have happened for you and the bills you have sponsored this week. But first, you do a survey, and to let people know, these surveys are important.
They're helpful because I usually try to pick things that I know are going to be, something moving through the General Assembly. So when they come to the floor, I mean, if I've got something that's opposed or supported, by a high degree, I mean, these aren't scientific polls, but they're not going to be completely inaccurate. I mean, I had 1,400 respondents across the district, and I mean, a lot of times when you do political surveys, you don't sample more than 200 or 300. So, in an area that size, they're not scientifically, cross-checked for demographics and all that, but they give you a pretty good, feedback of if something's 90% approval, you can be pretty confident that that's gonna play out as being strongly supported just across the district, or same thing on opposition.
And you on the Senate side do this survey, and I know that also on the representative side,
sure,
we get these.
Yep.
When will we get these? And if somebody missed it, they'll go,
okay,
I didn't get a chance. Well, you get a chance, you just got to know maybe
they're all mailed out. Usually we mail them out about the middle of December. We try to have them, we tell folks, try to get them back in early January so we can get them tabulated and back in time to, to be useful. But up until probably 2 weeks ago, we allowed people to do the online survey. And then we took all the mailed ones that we got in, put them through the optical scanners, and had the combination of both the online and mailed in, and the results weren't very much different from the online versus the combination of mailed and web service ones. So one of the issues that I asked about, and we had actually passed a law that enabled our Department of Health to submit under our Medicaid authorization to require people that are on HIP 2.0 to either be looking for work or require some degree of work to get their free health care. Okay. That was 92% supported. We're just in a little bit of battle right now with the federal Medicaid agency to get that. Actually, I think other states have submitted it, and the federal government's kind of pushing back on that. So I just want to make sure if we continue to press that we've still got strong support. It was the first time I asked it, we passed it, and it's still strongly supported. Raising the smoking and vaping age to 21, that was supported by 68% of the respondents. We ended up, and my online surveys were about the same percentages. That ended up getting passed, and we talked about that earlier this session. Putting a tax on vaping products that's similar to the tax on cigarettes, supported by 92% of the respondents. I think there's a House bill dealing with that. That usually would be a House issue since it's a revenue generator. Cameras in construction zones, and that's always to me, and it actually had 62% support. But that's always comes down to the devil in the details. If you're going to give people automatic tickets for speeding in a construction zone, when workers are present, how do you enforce it? How do you know the camera was on when there was actually workers there? My point to the author was, okay, I've got a commercial fleet with 40 trucks. Some days I've got 3 guys in the same truck going to a job site. How do I know 6 weeks later who was driving? And just so many unanswered questions. And the author said, we really didn't have time to vet this very completely. So he got it out of committee, but I don't believe they're going to actually, move it to final passage just because of all the questions that came up, with the devil's in the details. So
right, sure,
good idea for safety measures, but how do you protect people's, individual liberty and privacy, and how do you enforce it accurately? So that might come back next year. We'll see. And then should cities be able to annex without the majority of the people that are being annexed approving it? And that came back at 91%, opposition for a city to be able to annex when there's, and we've tried to tighten up the rules and make it a little harder for cities to annex. And we had a bill that passed out of the Senate this week by large support that said if you want to, before a city can move an annexation petition forward, they have to have signatures of 51% of the people involved. We've tried that in the past, and we pass them out of the Senate, and then the House kills them. So maybe this year we'll get it done.
See what happens.
That's right.
Now, it has been a good year, a good week for you. You had two bills that came out of that have been passed.
Two that were final
Senate.
passage, and two came out of committee.
All right, let's talk a little bit about that.
All right. So the first two that we'll talk about were the ones that had final passage. One was Senate Bill 205. And many times on your homeowners or auto policy, you have a coverage called medical payments benefits. It's usually small, $5,000 to $10,000, that you don't pay a lot for, but it's supposed to be able to provide out-of-pocket, expenses, coverage for you if you're in a car wreck, somebody gets hurt, to cover your deductibles and co-pays. And what's happened in practice is, hospitals have you sign a waiver when you come to the hospital that says, I forfeit my right to use those, those benefits, and I forfeit that to the hospital. And so they gobble it up and take it and use it to pay instead of you getting the discounted medical insurance, coverage. If a bill's $1,000 from the hospital, there's usually negotiated rates with Anthem or United, for maybe $300 for that same procedure. Well, the current procedure is the hospital make you sign waive that coverage, give it to them, and they apply it to the full $1,000 and not the health insurance discounted rate. And sometimes group plans or Anthem plans will have an assignment, a benefits clause that require to use that up first before their health coverage kicks in. And either way, you as the consumer who thought you had, cash for out-of-pocket expenses is getting gobbled up in the system, and you don't have any benefit to it. So this bill would require your medical coverage be primary and your med pay coverage on your homeowners or car insurance be secondary. So it allows you to, and you have as the consumer, you have the option, to dictate where it goes.
And we probably never know that even happens.
Oh,
I
no.
never even knew that happened until you brought this up a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. So that one passed 50-0. And my other bill, Senate Bill 206, that deals with the deposition of children that are sex abuse victims. Currently, Indiana has no restrictions on a defense attorney's ability to do a pretrial deposition of the victim. And many times it doesn't happen much in Dubois County. Our judges say our trial lawyers are pretty, behave well. Don't become overly aggressive to the child. But if you have a 5 or 6 year old or 10-year-old that's been a sex abuse victim, and you can get the defense attorney to aggressively, interview them, question them, to try to get, what they want for, to know what the defendant has to, be prepared for. Many times the families will not let the child, continue on. It's so traumatic to the kid. One of only 5 states that doesn't restrict what access the defense attorney has to the victim. And Senate Bill 206 would set up, really give, if you want to, as the defendant or the defendant, be able to interview the child, you'd have to go to the court and say, we don't have enough information to defend ourselves. Here's what we need and why. And then the judge will set up the rules to make sure that the kid has proper representation and limit, how the defense attorney can question that child to protect the kid.
Because they've probably already been interviewed in a
Once
forensics interview.
Yes,
so
most of the time.
Yes.
Either by law enforcement or by a forensic interview.
Like SWICAC?
Yep, absolutely, exactly. And those are all recorded, and so they can, and right now the prosecutors have to turn that over to the defendants so they know, what they're being, accused of. we don't want to impede on a person's ability to defend themselves if they're, whether they're accurately accused or falsely accused. And this bill sets up enough, balance of victims' rights versus, defendants' rights, and really puts the discretion, to the judge to really be the intermediary on all that. And that passed 49-1.
So these have passed in the Senate, these two bills. So now they will go to the House.
Yep.
Okay. And what's the likelihood there?
Well, I feel pretty good. You never know till you until you
right.
Which committee does it go to, and so I mean the work doesn't end when they pass out of the Senate. Then you got
to work with the people in the House.
Yes, okay. And that's key to success, is getting that relationship with those chairmen and those sponsors, and making sure they move along in the process. And I had two more come out of committee this week. One was, it's going to restructure work permits for minors, 14, 15, 16, and 17-year-olds that are employed. Currently, there's a work permit process that you have to do through the schools. Very cumbersome, really very ineffective, and creates a lot of burdens for kids' ability to get employed. We're going to shift that responsibility from the Department of Education to the Department of Labor, set up an online website for businesses to register their employees. Then the Department of Labor knows, who they've got to follow up with, whose records to inspect. Make it easier for the Department of Labor, make it easier for the employer, make it easier for the kid that wants to get a job. And Department of Labor worked with me and the other co-author very, very thoroughly. We're very supportive of it. All the businesses that were there were supportive of it. That came out of committee 11-1. And then another bill that I had deals with repurposing old coal mine property that's been reclaimed coal mine areas, to put some tax incentives similar to what we used to have for what we call the dinosaur buildings, like the old industrial sites that were no longer useful for a factory, but to repurpose them to offer tax incentives to get repurpose of old industrial sites. Well, a couple of years ago, we just found there was very few buildings that met that criteria, so they let that tax credit expire. But we're going to repurpose that, and instead of the dino credit being for a building, it'll be for old reclaimed strip mines. And there's a site over near Petersburg at the exit, 8,000 acres of old coal mine area that is really, it's got water, sewer, power, roads, it's got everything, but being repurposed coal mine property, it's just enough of an impediment for developers to say, we'll look for someplace a little, that we don't have to worry about that unknown. And if we incentivize it with some tax credits, hopefully we can get site developers to be much more interested in that spot. Plus, I mean, southern Indiana is littered with millions of acres of area just like that. So.
Excellent. Well, I hope those, wish you luck with those.
Thank you.
Good luck with the two bills that went through. Mm-hmm. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Yep, we'll do a first half recap next week.
First half recap. Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you very much. State Senator Mark Messmer joining us on WJTS Informed. Thank you, Senator. Mm-hmm. And join us next week, same time, as the Senator will be back. Thank you for watching WJTS. We're local people watching local people.